Evan Mercer sat at a corner table in a quiet restaurant in Napa Valley, wishing he could disappear into the dim light that wrapped around him. 5 years had passed since his wife died, yet every step he took toward rebuilding his life still felt like walking through fog. He had agreed to this blind date only because his 8-year-old daughter Harper had looked at him with worried eyes and said she did not want him to be alone forever. He wanted to try for her, even though hope felt fragile in his hands. He arrived early, dressed in a simple gray sweater and dark jeans that reflected his habit of avoiding attention. He knew people expected a billionaire founder of a medical technology company to show up polished and imposing, but he never felt comfortable wearing any of the armor that wealth seemed to demand. When Amelia, his blind date, entered, her eyes moved over him with a flick of disappointment that she did not bother to hide. She sat down slowly, as if already preparing an exit, and the air between them tightened before either of them spoke. Amelia asked him perfunctory questions about his work, his schedule, and finally his family. When he mentioned Harper, her expression sharpened. She leaned back, lifted her purse, and said she was not interested in raising someone else's child. Her voice carried just enough volume to make nearby tables glance over, and Evan felt a heat rise up his neck. He tried to steady himself, telling her he understood if she was not looking for a parent role. But she cut him off with a clipped remark that made him feel smaller than he had in years. Before he could respond, Amelia stood, pushed her chair back, and walked out without a hint of regret. A young man at a nearby table, who had been casually scrolling through his phone, angled it suddenly toward Evan and began live streaming. Evan heard him whisper to his followers that this was what happened when a man tried too hard to date out of his league. The comments sliced through him. He knew how cruel strangers could be online, yet hearing those words in public made every scar he carried ache all at once. The restaurant seemed to close in on him, every conversation fading into a distant hum, while the weight of humiliation settled on his chest. Memories of hospital rooms and late-night promises to his dying wife flooded him without warning. He had believed that time would dull the sharpness of grief, but moments like this proved how easily old wounds reopened. Evan rose from his seat, his movements slow, as if each step required more strength than he possessed. Eyes followed him with pity that pressed against his spine like a hand urging him to leave quickly. He reached for his coat, trying to keep his face neutral, but his vision blurred for a second, and he blinked hard to steady himself. He told himself he needed to go home, needed to hear Harper's voice, and remind himself that he was more than the man a stranger had reduced him to. As he moved toward the exit, the young man with the phone muttered something about sending the clip to a gossip account, and a ripple of laughter rose behind Evan's back. He kept walking, swallowing the burn in his chest, determined not to let anyone see how deeply the moment cut him. Just as he stepped past the final row of tables, a calm feminine voice rose behind him, clear enough to silence a few murmurs nearby. She asked if he did not already belong to someone and if he would be her husband. The words hung in the air with a kind of impossible sincerity that made him stop mid-stride. Evan turned slowly, expecting a joke or another stranger with a phone, but instead he found a woman standing near his abandoned table. She looked at him with soft, steady eyes that held neither pity nor mockery, only understanding. Her presence felt strangely grounding after the chaos of the last few minutes. She stepped closer and introduced herself as Maya Lawson, a teacher who had watched the entire scene unfold. Her voice carried neither judgment nor hesitation. Instead, she spoke as if she were offering him something human in a moment when he felt anything but. Evan stood frozen, unable to make sense of her question or the calm sincerity in her expression. For the first time that night, he did not feel alone. He only knew that her eyes held a quiet resolve that steadied the world around them. In that suspended breath, he wondered if fate had shifted in a direction he could trust. Maya Lawson did not look like someone who would ever cross paths with a man like Evan Mercer, let alone ask him a question bold enough to freeze a room. She stood there in a simple navy dress, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail, a tote bag slung over one shoulder, with the corner of a children's storybook sticking out. Nothing about her suggested wealth or high society. Everything about her suggested honesty. When Evan finally found his voice, he asked her what she had just said. Maya did not flinch. She repeated the question quietly, her expression steady, as if she understood the weight of her words and still chose to carry them. She watched him carefully, and then let a soft apology slip out for startling him. She explained she had seen how Amelia treated him, and that no one deserved to be spoken to that way. Evan tried to shake off the humiliation, insisting he was fine. But Maya interrupted gently and said he did not have to pretend. Something in her tone made him exhale for the first time since Amelia walked out. She asked if he could sit back down with her for a moment, just away from the curious glances. He hesitated, then followed, unsure why he trusted this stranger, but unable to walk away. Once seated, Maya told him she had absolutely no idea who he was, and Evan felt his guard drop another inch. Most people recognized his name eventually, or at least acted differently when they discovered what he did. But Maya only saw a man wounded by something he had not deserved. She introduced herself as an elementary school teacher from Santa Rosa, who spent most of her days with children who carried big feelings in small bodies. She spoke gently but directly, hands folded on the table shoulders, squared as if she had trained herself to stay calm, even when the world shook. Evan asked why she would ever ask such a question to a stranger. Maya inhaled and said she would tell him the truth if he promised not to laugh. He nodded. She explained that she was in the middle of a legal battle for custody of her 5-year-old nephew Connor, the child her sister had left behind after a sudden accident. Maya had been raising him for the past year, but her sisters-in-laws believed she was not stable enough to continue caring for him. They claimed her salary was too small, her home too modest, and her life too chaotic to be trusted with a child. She had endured months of court hearings and accusations that painted her as irresponsible. The worst of it was hearing that a single woman, without a partner, was considered a less secure choice for a child's future. Her voice trembled as she quoted the attorney who represented the other side, saying a child needed 2 parents to have structure, emotional stability, and a reliable household. Evan listened without blinking. She had said nothing about dependency money or wanting an easy solution. She did not ask him to love her or to play father to a child he had never met. She simply said the court favored households that appeared complete, even if the picture was only painted on paper. When he asked if she was telling him that she needed a husband for legal points, Maya shook her head firmly. She admitted she did not want to use anyone as a prop. She only spoke up because she had seen a man who clearly valued family and who had endured the same kind of judgment she had. She said that anyone who loved his child as openly as he did should never be told he was not enough. Evan felt her words settle in a deep place he rarely allowed anyone to touch. She told him she knew he was a father before he even mentioned Harper because of how he stiffened when Amelia dismissed the idea of raising a child. She said it was the same protective instinct she had when someone doubted her love for Connor. Evan asked why she thought he could help her. Maya said she had no certainty. She simply thought that maybe 2 people who were being misunderstood in different ways, might be able to give each other something solid to stand on. She emphasized that she did not know he was wealthy or influential. She thought he was a quiet single dad who deserved better than what he got tonight. Her honesty disarmed him. When she reached into her tote bag and retrieved a small white card, Evan expected some formal pitch, but instead the card simply had her name, her school, and a handwritten sentence that said she believed people deserved to be chosen for who they were, not for what they could provide. She slid it toward him with a calmness that made the entire moment feel more intimate than reckless. Evan stared at the card. She told him that he deserved someone who chose him without hesitation, and she admitted she needed anyone who believed she was enough to be a parent. Not because she fit legal checkboxes, but because she loved a child with everything she had. She confessed she had watched him tonight and saw a man who still carried love like a living thing. When she finished, she leaned back slightly and said he did not need to answer her question. She only wanted him to know that he had worth that no amount of rejection could erase. Evan could not remember the last time a woman spoke to him with such clarity and without expectation. He told her he was grateful but overwhelmed. She smiled the kind of smile that softened the edges of the world and told him to take the card and think about it. She stood to leave, pausing long enough to tell him that maybe life sometimes introduced the right people at the wrong moment so they could become the right moment later. As she walked toward the door, Evan felt the room grow quieter. The humiliation he had carried minutes earlier no longer sat so heavily on his shoulders. He picked up her card, read the handwritten line again, and wondered why a stranger's belief in him felt more real than anything he had heard in years. Evan spent the next 2 days thinking about Maya's card more than he expected. He kept it in the pocket of his coat, touching it absent-mindedly whenever he paused between meetings or sat in quiet moments at home, while Harper colored at the kitchen table. He did not know why the brief conversation with a stranger had left such an imprint, but something about the way she looked at him, as if she saw the person behind the fading grief and heavy responsibilities, made him feel as if the world had nudged him towards something he had not allowed himself to consider. On the 3rd evening, after the disastrous blind date, he sent her a short message asking if she had time for dinner. She replied within minutes, saying she could meet him at a small Italian cafe, tucked between a bookstore and a bike shop in Santa Rosa. When Evan arrived, Maya was already seated at a booth near the window with a glass of water in front of her. She wore a soft cream sweater and simple earrings that caught the light when she turned her head. When she saw him, she smiled with a calm sincerity that made his chest warm for reasons he did not want to examine yet. They ordered pasta and warm bread, and conversation filled the space between them in gentle waves. At first, they spoke cautiously about harmless topics like the weather, the food, and the chaos of the morning commute. But soon Maya asked about Harper, and Evan found himself talking about his daughter's love for drawing her stubbornness. When she insisted on wearing glitter boots, even on rainy days, and her fear of thunderstorms, Maya listened intently, leaning in slightly, her eyes never drifting away, as if every detail mattered. She told him she loved children because they felt everything so honestly and forgave so easily, 2 qualities adults often forgot how to practice. When she spoke about Connor, her voice softened but also carried a hidden ache. She said he had been clinging to her more lately, waking from nightmares and calling her name terrified. She would vanish the way his mother had. Evan felt an unexpected sting in his chest. People often forgot that children grieved too, and their grief had nowhere to go, except into the arms of the person who stayed. Maya admitted she was afraid that if the court took Connor away, she would lose more than a child. She would lose the last piece of her sister's laughter, her warmth, the echo of the person she had looked up to all her life. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly, apologizing under her breath. Evan reached across the table, not touching her but letting his hand rest near hers in quiet solidarity. He told her she had nothing to apologize for. She gave him a small, sad smile and said she was tired of being told. She was not enough tired of being judged by people who had no idea how hard she fought for the child she loved. Evan understood that feeling all too well. After his wife died, he had been judged as well, not in court, but by silent expectations. People assumed a grieving man should move on quickly or not at all. They assumed he should know how to balance fatherhood business and sorrow without faltering. But he had faltered many times. He had struggled to cook meals that tasted like anything but convenience, to braid Harper's hair before school, to sign permission slips on time. He had felt inadequate, overwhelmed, and terrified of failing the only child who still looked at him as if he could fix anything. When he told Maya this, she listened with empathy that felt grounding. She said grief was not something to outgrow, but something to live alongside until it softened enough to let light back in. The words hit him deep, as if she understood a language he spoke without speaking. Their food arrived, but they barely touched it for several minutes. As their stories unfolded, like layered pages from two separate lives that somehow aligned in spirit, Evan shared that his wife Emma had battled cancer for years, and that during her final months he had promised her he would give Harper a life full of love, not loneliness. But after her death, fulfilling that promise felt impossible. Maya listened without fear or discomfort, not looking for the smooth ending of a tragic story, but honoring the rawness of it. She told him her sister Lily had been the brave one in their family, and that losing her had taken a piece of Maya's own courage. She said raising Connor had brought some of that courage back, but also exposed how fragile family structures were when outsiders got involved. At one point, she confessed, she sometimes slept on the floor next to Connor's bed when his nightmares were too strong, because he reached out for her in the dark. The smallness of that confession told Evan everything he needed to know about her heart. Their conversation deepened until it felt as if the room around them had faded, leaving only the soft glow of the cafe lights, the quiet clatter of dishes, and the shared warmth rising between them. It was the first time in years Evan felt a steady comfort in someone's presence that did not come from obligation or expectation. When the server returned to ask if they wanted dessert, Maya surprised Evan by saying yes, laughing that she needed something sweet after an emotionally heavy day. They shared a slice of tiramisu, taking turns with the fork, in a way that felt far more intimate than either of them seemed ready to acknowledge. When the check came, Evan reached for it, but Maya shook her head. She said she did not want him to feel like he owed her anything, especially not after what she had confessed. Evan insisted that he wanted to take care of dinner, not out of obligation, but because he was grateful. Maya hesitated, then relented, her eyes softening again. As they stood to leave, she reached out and gently touched his wrist. It was a brief touch, but it sent a warmth through him that lingered even after her hand fell back to her side. She told him she cherished the conversation and that she hoped it did not overwhelm him. Evan said he felt more understood in one evening with her than he had in years, and Maya's expression shifted into something tender and a little startled, as if she had not expected him to feel the same connection she felt. Before they walked out the door, she took a breath and said one more thing. She told him that even if he did not want to consider her unusual question, she hoped he would consider this truth instead. She told him he deserved peace, companionship, and a home that felt whole again. She said maybe 2 lonely houses could become one safe place, not because of legal reasons or desperation, but because 2 people who had lost so much might be able to give each other something real. Evan stood still, letting those words settle like warm light inside him. When he finally walked her to her car, he realized he did not want the night to end. He wanted to know more, feel more, understand more. He wanted to see where the fragile thread between them might lead. As Maya drove away, Evan watched her taillights fade into the evening and understood something quietly, undeniably true. This dinner had not felt like a date. It had felt like coming home. Evan spent the weekend thinking about how he should introduce Maya to Harper. He knew this step was significant and that it had to be handled carefully. Harper was only 8, but she had an emotional intuition that often surpassed adults. She noticed small changes in tone, the weight of silence at the dinner table, and the way her father's smile sometimes faded too quickly. She protected her heart fiercely, not because she was cold, but because losing her mother so young had planted a quiet fear inside her. Evan decided to take Harper to the park on Sunday afternoon. He sent Maya a message asking if she was free to stop by for a casual meeting. She replied that she would come, but only if Harper wanted her there. When she arrived, Harper was sitting on a picnic blanket, drawing with markers, her curly hair tied in a loose ponytail, her glitter boots sticking straight out in front of her as she colored intensely. She looked up when Evan approached with Maya a few steps behind him. Harper's eyes flicked between them. She did not smile. She simply studied Maya with a seriousness that made Maya pause a few feet away. Evan knelt beside his daughter and told her this was the woman he had mentioned, someone he thought Harper would enjoy meeting. Harper did not respond immediately. Instead, she closed the cap on her marker, stood up, and walked straight to Maya until they were nearly eye level. Harper was small for her age, but her presence was surprisingly strong. Maya crouched down slowly so she would not tower over the little girl. Harper asked for her name. Maya said it gently and waited. Harper then asked why she had dinner with her dad. Evan felt a jolt of nerves. Maya gave Harper a truthful answer without overcomplicating it. She said she had enjoyed talking with him and wanted to understand him better because he was a good man. Harper narrowed her eyes as if examining the honesty of those words. She asked if Maya knew about her mom. Maya nodded and said yes. She did know his wife had passed away and that she was not here to replace anyone. She added softly that no one ever could. Harper blinked at that answer. It was the first sign of softened resistance. Harper then asked what Maya did for work and what she liked. Maya told her she was a teacher, that she loved books and art, and that helping children feel safe at school was important to her. Harper looked down at her drawing pad and, without speaking, handed Maya the marker she had been holding. It was her way of inviting someone into her space. Maya accepted the marker with a warm smile and sat on the blanket. For a moment, no one said anything. Harper watched Maya carefully as she began drawing a small sun at the corner of the page. Maya did not comment on the work or offer to fix anything. She simply added the sun and waited. Harper moved closer and began drawing beside her. Their markers created quiet rhythms. The tension began to lift. Evan stayed a few steps back, overwhelmed by how natural the moment felt. He watched Maya lean slightly toward Harper, but never too close. She let Harper guide the space between them. After a few minutes, Harper asked a question that made Evan's breath catch. She asked why Maya had made his dad smile. Maya looked at Evan, then at Harper. She answered with care. She said that sometimes grown-ups carried heavy feelings they tried to hide, and sometimes meeting the right person at the right moment could make a little bit of that weight feel lighter. Harper did not respond immediately. She simply nodded as if processing the idea. She then asked if Maya was going to marry her dad. Evan froze. Maya did not laugh or look embarrassed. Instead, she told Harper the truth. She said she had asked him a very big question, but it was not something they were deciding now. She said her question had come from a place of fear and love for her nephew, and she wanted to be honest about that. She added that whatever happened, she cared about being a good person in Evan's life, only if it was something he and Harper wanted too. Harper studied her for a long time before asking something that Maya had not expected. She asked if Maya liked children only because she was a teacher, or if she liked them because she understood them. Maya answered that she liked them because she understood what it felt like to be small, in a world full of big worries. Harper's posture softened. She sat beside Maya and quietly began drawing a new picture. This time she drew 3 figures holding hands. She did not explain who they were, but Evan saw it and felt something shift inside him. After some time, Harper tugged on Maya's sleeve and asked if she could help her practice her show and tell speech. Maya agreed with an enthusiastic nod. Harper pulled a small plastic dinosaur from her backpack and began explaining it shyly. Her voice cracked in the middle. Normally she would have shut down, but Maya placed a gentle hand on her back and encouraged her to keep going. With Maya's calm guidance, Harper completed the entire speech for the first time without giving up. When she finished, she smiled with a pride Evan had not seen in months. Harper turned to her father and asked if Maya could come again next week. The question came out so naturally that it startled both adults. Maya looked at Evan to make sure he was comfortable. Evan felt an unexpected swell of gratitude and nodded. Harper then surprised Maya by leaning in and giving her a brief hug. It was small, hesitant, but real. The kind of hug a child gives someone who has passed a test of the heart. As they prepared to leave, Harper slipped her hand into Maya's without being prompted. Evan saw it and felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. On the walk back to the car, Harper looked up at him and said quietly that Maya was the first person who talked to her like she was not a kid who needed fixing, but a kid who needed understanding. Evan felt that truth settle inside him. When Maya waved goodbye and walked away across the park, Harper whispered that she wanted to see her again. Evan watched Maya disappear down the path, sunlight catching in her hair. Something in him whispered the same thing Harper had said. He wanted to see her again too. Evan had expected Harper to forget about Maya after a day or two. The way children often shifted their attention from one interest to another, but instead, Harper spent the entire week talking about the woman she met at the park. Every afternoon, she asked if Maya had texted. Every morning, she asked if Maya could come over again. By Friday, after Harper successfully delivered her show and tell at school with a confidence that took her teacher by surprise, Evan realized there was no reason to postpone the inevitable. He sent Maya a message inviting her to join them for dinner on Saturday evening at his house, adding that Harper would be thrilled to see her again. Maya replied with a simple acceptance and a smiling note that she would bring dessert. The following evening, Evan cleaned the kitchen for the 3rd time while Harper set the table with mismatched plates and colorful napkins. She insisted made the meal feel special. Harper chose the lavender-scented candle because she said it smelled like the book corner in Maya's classroom, a detail that made Evan smile despite his nerves. When the doorbell rang, Harper sprinted to the door faster than Evan could stop her. She swung it open and greeted Maya with a bright smile. Maya wore a soft blue blouse and carried a small glass dish covered with foil. She stepped inside with a warmth that made their home feel instantly fuller. Harper took her hand and led her straight to the dining room as if she belonged there. Evan watched them move around the space together and felt something shift in the air. The walls that often felt too quiet seemed to breathe again. Dinner began, simply just roasted chicken, vegetables, and rice, but the conversation brought everything to life. Harper told Maya every detail about her dinosaur presentation, reenacting parts of it with dramatic hand gestures. Maya applauded her and said she was proud, which caused Harper to beam at a brightness Evan had not seen in months. When Evan added that Harper had practiced all week, Maya looked at him with quiet admiration and said he was doing a beautiful job as a father. That one sentence, delivered without pity or exaggeration, touched a place inside him that had been starving for acknowledgement. Evan cleared his throat and looked down at his plate, feeling a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the food. As they ate, Maya shared stories from her classroom. She talked about a boy who tried to smuggle a frog into school to show his friends a girl who insisted pizza was a vegetable, and a shy student who once whispered that her voice felt too small for the world. She spoke with humor, compassion, and an underlying gentleness that made Harper lean closer with every sentence. Evan noticed that Maya had a way of turning ordinary moments into something meaningful. She saw details that others overlooked. She paid attention to emotions, the way musicians paid attention to notes. At one point, Harper excused herself to get a drawing she had been working on. When she returned, she handed Maya a small paper bracelet she had crafted earlier that day. The bracelet was made of markers and tape, decorated with stars and small hearts. It looked like something only a child could see beauty in, but Maya received it as if it were a treasure. Maya slipped the bracelet onto her wrist and told Harper she would keep it forever. Harper whispered that her mom used to collect things she made, and that this was the first bracelet she had given someone in a long time. The air changed when she said that. Evan felt the familiar ache of losing Emma rise in his chest, but instead of pulling away, Maya reached out and gently touched Harper's shoulder. She told her it was an honor to be given something so special, and that she would take good care of it. Harper nodded and leaned into her for a moment, something she rarely did with adults she did not know well. After they finished dinner, Maya offered to help clean up. Evan tried to refuse, but she insisted, rolling up her sleeves and standing beside him at the sink. Harper dried the dishes with a towel, much too big for her hands. The three of them moved around the kitchen in an unspoken rhythm that surprised Evan. It had been years since the house felt alive with more than one voice, years since laughter from two people other than himself and his daughter filled the room. When Harper finished drying dishes, she announced she would prepare a surprise performance. She ran into the living room, turned on a lamp with dramatic flair, and declared that she would be singing a song she made up. Her voice was soft and shaky at first, but when she saw both adults smiling at her, she relaxed and let the melody flow. Maya clapped at the end with such enthusiasm that Harper bowed several times, giggling. Evan leaned against the counter and watched the scene unfold, a sensation blooming in his chest that he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Peace. Not the kind of peace that came from silence, but the kind that grew from connection, from warmth, from the presence of someone who saw the world in a way that matched the rhythm of his own heart. After the performance, Harper asked Maya to read her a bedtime story. Evan was surprised by the request, but did not object. The three of them walked upstairs. Harper climbed into bed with her stuffed dinosaur tucked under her arm. Maya sat beside her and read in a soft, measured voice that seemed to soothe even the corners of the room. Evan leaned against the doorway, watching as Harper's eyes grew heavier. He saw how Maya paused occasionally to hold the space for Harper's small comments or questions, a gentleness that reflected deep patience. When Harper finally drifted asleep, Maya closed the book quietly and stood. Evan walked her downstairs. There was a quiet moment in the entryway where neither of them spoke. Maya adjusted the bracelet on her wrist and smiled. She said she had enjoyed the evening more than she expected. Evan told her the house felt different with her in it. Maya looked up at him, startled by the honesty in his tone. She asked what he meant. Evan hesitated before admitting that things had felt heavy for a long time, and that tonight felt like a breath he had forgotten how to take. Maya stepped closer, her eyes softening. She said that grief often made people forget the sound of their own hearts. She added that sometimes it took the right company to hear it again. They stood there for another moment before she told him she should go. Evan walked her to the door. She paused on the porch, the cool evening air brushing between them. She thanked him for dinner, then turned to leave. As she walked down the path toward her car, Harper's bracelet glowed under the porch light, a small reminder of the new space she had begun to carve into their lives. Evan watched her drive away and felt something he had tried so hard to suppress. Hope that this fragile connection could become something real. The following week began with an unusual lightness in the Mercer home. Harper woke earlier than usual, humming while brushing her teeth, and insisted on packing an extra snack for school. Because she said it felt like a lucky day. Evan noticed the shift immediately, and although he tried not to read too much into it, he sensed that Harper's renewed energy came from something deeper than routine. She had found comfort in Maya's presence, and the warmth still lingered in her smile. Evan also found himself checking his phone more often than necessary, hoping to see a message from Maya. Their conversations had grown steadier, filled with small check-ins about each other's day, and light-hearted exchanges about Harper's drawings or Connor's latest dinosaur fascination. It was subtle, but something between them was building, layer by layer, forming a bond he had not imagined feeling again. Then everything began to unravel on a Wednesday evening. Evan was in his office, going through reports when his phone vibrated once, then again, then several more times in rapid succession. At first, he thought it was work-related, until he saw that the notifications came from social media alerts sent by his communications team. The subject line in one message made his stomach tighten. Viral clip identified. Potential PR issue. When he opened the link, the video that loaded made his chest seize. It was the live stream from the blind date at Napa Valley. Someone had edited the footage into a short clip that showed Amelia insulting him, implying he was not worth her time, and walking away dramatically. The clip ended with a zoomed shot of his shocked face, making it look as if he had been crushed under the weight of rejection. There was no context, no kindness, no fairness in the narrative. It was pure spectacle. The caption read, "When you get rejected, even though you are trying your best." The video had already accumulated hundreds of thousands of views. Comments flooded the screen. Some users mocked Amelia. Others pitied Evan. Some guessed he was unemployed or uninteresting. A few praised him for being a dedicated father. But what worried him most was the trend forming beneath the clip. Users began looking for the woman who approached him after Amelia left. Someone captured the moment Maya spoke to him, but the audio was unclear. Speculations erupted anyway. A teacher trying to shoot her shot. A desperate woman looking for a man with money. A gold digger move right after rejection. Evan felt heat rise under his collar. His protective instinct flared immediately. He forwarded the video to his head of communications with instructions to request takedowns, but knew it was probably too late. Once something went viral, it lived on its own. He called Maya instantly. She answered on the second ring, sounding puzzled. Before he could explain, she received her own flood of notifications. Her voice changed as she saw the clip for the first time. She asked why people were tagging her and calling her names. Evan tried to steady her, but she was already navigating through cruel comments. A screenshot of the three of them at the park had surfaced on someone's account, incorrectly identifying her as his girlfriend. People speculated wildly about her intentions, her appearance, her job, her character. As Evan listened to her breathing quicken, he realized that Maya was not just being criticized, she was being attacked. He told her he was coming over right away, but she stopped him. She said she needed a moment to process what she was seeing. Her voice trembled, but she tried to sound composed. Evan wanted to push back to insist, but he respected her boundary and said he would wait for her to call him back. After hanging up, he ran his hands over his face and cursed under his breath. The clip's momentum was growing by the minute. Comments began targeting Maya personally. Some accused her of manipulating a vulnerable single dad. Others labeled her a clout chaser. The worst ones claimed she had intentionally swooped in to use the situation for fame. It was a grotesque distortion of the truth. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Maya sat on her living room floor with her phone in her hands, staring at messages she had not asked for and did not know how to cope with. She had always lived a quiet life filled with books, lesson plans, and gentle routines. She had never been inside the storm of public judgment. Now strangers were dissecting her motives, her character, her worth. She dropped her phone and covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks in silent panic. After several minutes, she forced herself to breathe evenly. She needed clarity. She picked her phone back up and dialed her sister's in-laws, knowing a new court hearing was coming. She needed to control the damage before it spiraled. But the call was met with pointed accusations. They had already seen the video and immediately used it as ammunition. They claimed it proved she was unstable, seeking attention, incapable of providing a calm environment for a child. They told her they would be filing to expedite the custody case because of what they called her reckless public behavior. Maya tried to defend herself, but her voice crumbled under their ice-cold tone. When she hung up, she felt a numbness spread through her limbs. She had spent months proving she was capable, reliable, and loving. Now one twisted moment online had the power to unravel everything. Evan waited as long as he could before calling Maya again. This time she answered with a soft, broken sigh. She apologized for needing space and asked him not to come over tonight because she did not want Harper to see her upset. Evan told her Harper cared for her and would not judge her, but Maya insisted. She said she needed to think about how to protect both Connor and Harper from the fallout. Evan heard the exhaustion in her whisper. He wanted to go to her anyway, to hold her and shield her from the cruelty of strangers, but he respected her boundaries. Maya then said something that twisted his chest. She said if he saved her with money or influence, the court would paint her as a woman who depended on powerful men to solve her problems. She said she could not let that happen. Evan argued, telling her he did not see her that way, but Maya gently reminded him that courts did not look at hearts, they looked at optics. She said she needed to handle this with dignity. Her voice cracked on the word dignity. After she hung up, Evan sat alone in the quiet living room, feeling the heavy stillness press in on him. Harper peeked into the room and asked if Maya was okay. Evan hesitated, then pulled his daughter onto his lap. He told her Maya was going through something difficult, but that she would be all right. Harper nodded and rested her head on his chest. Evan held her tightly and stared at the dark window. For the first time in years, he felt a fear he did not know how to navigate. Not fear of loss, but fear of watching someone he cared for be hurt by forces he could not immediately control. As the night deepened and notifications continued buzzing on his phone, Evan whispered that he would not let this destroy Maya. He did not know how yet, but he knew one thing clearly. He was not letting her face this storm alone. The following days unfolded in a way that neither Evan nor Maya could have prepared for. The viral clip continued to spread across platforms, breaking past 1 million views, then climbing still higher as commentary channels dissected every second of the footage. Evan's communication team attempted to redirect the narrative, but the internet had already built its own storyline. Maya stayed mostly silent, focusing on her students while trying to pretend the world outside her classroom was not spinning out of control. Evan wanted to see her, but she stayed distant, protecting herself, protecting her nephew, and trying to shield Harper from the noise. By the end of the week, however, there was an event that Evan could not avoid and could not attend alone. It was the annual Mercer Foundation Gala, a fundraising event for pediatric medical care, and the largest philanthropic night his company hosted each year. He had already promised Harper he would attend, and Harper, who still talked about Maya with softness in her voice, asked if Maya would be coming too. Evan gently told her he was not sure. That uncertainty followed him like a shadow as he dressed in his usual understated black suit and tied his tie with a heaviness in his hands. He arrived at the venue early, greeted by polished marble floors, classical music, and the shimmering glow of chandeliers. The guests filtering in wore tailored suits and gowns that whispered luxury with every movement. It was a world built on polite conversation and unspoken hierarchies, a world where status quietly dictated how high someone stood or how far someone could fall. Maya did not belong here, not because she was unworthy, but because the people in this room had always measured worth with the wrong scales. Evan took his place near the entrance to greet donors, but his eyes kept drifting toward the door, as if hoping against logic that she might walk through it. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. He stopped allowing himself to expect anything. But just as he turned to greet another board member, he heard a familiar soft intake of breath behind him. He turned, and there she was. Maya stepped into the lobby wearing a simple but elegant maroon dress, her hair falling softly around her shoulders. She looked out of place, and yet breathtakingly grounded, like a warm flame in a cold room. She clutched a small clutch, nervously her eyes scanning for him, before finally meeting his gaze. Evan approached her quickly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. He asked if she was sure she wanted to be here. Maya nodded slowly, admitting she had debated it all day. But she said Harper's last message, asking if she would come, gave her the final push. Still, he saw the tension in her shoulders, the hesitation in her movements. He wanted to pull her into his arms, tell her she could leave whenever she wanted. But before he had the chance, a group of board members approached to greet him. They froze mid-step when they noticed Maya at his side. The shift in their expressions was subtle but unmistakable. Curiosity sharpened into judgment. One of the women dressed in an emerald gown that shimmered too brightly plastered on a polite but pointed smile. She asked Evan if he could introduce his companion. Maya extended her hand with grace and introduced herself as a teacher, but the woman barely concealed her surprise. Her gaze flicked over Maya's modest dress, the lack of designer labels, and the small clutch instead of an evening bag that matched the room's unspoken expectations. Another donor joined the group and whispered something under her breath that made the first woman laugh quietly behind her champagne glass. Evan's jaw tightened. Before he could intervene, the woman in emerald leaned toward Maya and complimented her dress in a tone that carried the sting of condescension. She said it was refreshing to see someone who did not feel pressured to dress up too much, as if simplicity were a sign of naivety. Maya stiffened but did not respond. She maintained her composure, but her fingers tightened slightly, around her clutch. Evan was about to speak when another woman approached, this one younger, wearing diamonds that glittered like ice under the chandelier lights. She glanced at Evan, then at Maya, then smirked. She asked Maya if she worked at the catering company or if she was here with someone. This time Evan stepped forward sharply, but before he could say anything, Harper appeared from behind him and wrapped both arms tightly around Maya's waist. Maya froze for a moment, then instinctively embraced the child. Harper smiled up at her and said she was happy Maya came. The air shifted. The judgment from the women faltered as they realized Harper, the child so many donors adored, had chosen Maya in a heartbeat. Maya knelt to speak with Harper, but the venom lingering in the room still pulsed around them. When Maya stood again, Evan took her hand, not caring who watched. He told the donors politely that he needed to escort his guest to her seat. The women exchanged looks behind his back, whispers already forming. As they walked through the room, Evan felt Maya's hand trembling. When they reached a quieter corner, he asked if she wanted to leave. She told him no. She said she refused to let strangers who knew nothing about her dictate where she did or did not belong. She said she had spent her life teaching children to show courage and that she needed to practice what she taught. Evan felt admiration swell so strongly he had to steady his breath, but he also sensed something else: hurt. That night was supposed to be a celebration of compassion and healing, yet people who claimed to support children's health could not spare kindness for a woman who cared for a child as fiercely as she did. As the evening went on, Evan stayed close to her. He introduced her to people who treated her with respect. He made sure she never stood alone near anyone who had mocked her earlier. Harper stayed by Maya's side, holding her hand, guiding her through conversations with surprising maturity. Maya thanked Harper repeatedly for being brave, and Harper shrugged and said she was just staying with her favorite person. That sentence pierced Evan's chest with emotion he did not know how to manage. He watched Maya laugh softly, with Harper watched her shoulders relax. Toward the end of the night, watched her find her footing in a room not built for her. But the damage from earlier lingered. When the event ended and Evan walked her to her car, Maya finally let the truth slip. She said she did not belong in his world. She said people like her were meant to be invisible in rooms like that. She said she hated that she let their words get to her. Evan stepped closer and told her that she belonged wherever he was not, because she needed his protection, but because her presence made the world softer for both him and Harper. Maya shook her head, wiped away a fragile tear, and said that was exactly the problem. Worlds like his had sharp edges, ones that cut people like her when she was not looking. But then she looked at him, really looked at him, and said she did not want to walk away from him either. Evan felt the weight of her conflict, and his response came out in a whisper. He said he would spend as long as it took to make sure she never felt unwelcome again. She stood there for a long moment, caught between fear and hope. Then she reached for his hand, held it briefly, and said good night. As she drove away, Evan knew that tonight had not just been a clash of worlds. It had been the beginning of choosing which world he wanted to live in, and he knew without question it was the one where Maya Lawson stood. Maya woke the next morning with a weight in her chest that felt heavier than anything she had carried in months. The gala had left her with a mixture of strength and exhaustion. She replayed the condescending remarks, the icy stares, the whispers behind hands, disguised as polite conversation. Yet she also remembered Harper's small warm hand in hers and Evan's steady presence beside her. Those moments kept her from collapsing entirely. But today was different. Today was the preliminary hearing in her custody case for Connor. She dressed in her simplest black dress, tying her hair back neatly, and packed a folder full of documents she had prepared meticulously. She paused before Connor's bedroom door, listening to his soft breathing. She did not wake him. She did not want him to see her anxiety. When she arrived at the courthouse, the building loomed like a stern reminder that truth did not always win. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered slightly, adding a coldness to the already tense air. Maya sat on a bench outside the courtroom, clutching her documents. Her sisters-in-laws stood across the hall, dressed sharply, faces purposeful and confident. The attorney they hired walked toward them with an air of certainty, like a surgeon entering a familiar operating theater. They barely glanced at Maya. When the courtroom doors opened, she stepped inside quietly and sat at the petitioner's table. Her heart pounded with a steady thud, but her posture remained calm. She had promised herself she would not flinch no matter what was said. Her attorney, a kind but overworked public advocate named Denise, arrived moments later. Denise assured her that they would present the truth as clearly as possible. But Maya could see the strain in her eyes. She knew Denise was juggling several similar cases. Maya whispered a thank you anyway. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp eyes that seemed to see through both arrogance and weakness. When she began the hearing, Maya straightened, preparing for what she suspected would be a painful fight. The opposing attorney presented first. He spoke with a smooth, controlled voice, outlining concerns about Maya's stability. He emphasized her modest salary as a teacher, her small home, and her lack of familial support. He claimed these factors made her environment uncertain for a child who had already faced trauma. Maya's stomach twisted at how he framed her life. Then he shifted topics, bringing up the viral video. He described it as evidence of questionable judgment and reckless public exposure. He suggested Maya placed herself in situations that brought unnecessary attention, destabilizing the child's emotional environment. Maya's breath caught. The judge raised an eyebrow and asked how a social media clip was relevant to her parenting ability. The attorney argued that it demonstrated impulsive decision-making and susceptibility to dramatic public encounters, traits he claimed could negatively affect a child under her care. Maya clenched her hands under the table. She wanted to shout that she had done nothing wrong, that she had only spoken compassionately to a stranger. But she remained quiet. The judge turned to Maya's attorney. Denise rose and spoke firmly, explaining that Maya had been the victim of someone else's live stream and had acted with kindness in a difficult moment. She presented letters from Maya's school, praising her patience and dedication. She showed attendance records, Connor's improved behavior reports, and statements from neighbors who had witnessed how lovingly she cared for the boy. The judge listened, nodding occasionally. Then she asked to hear from Maya directly. Maya stood slowly, feeling every eye in the courtroom on her. She spoke clearly about her love for Connor, about raising him since her sister's death, about comforting him through nightmares and teaching him how to feel safe again. She said she did not have much, but she had a home filled with stability and love. She admitted she was not perfect, but said she would do anything to protect him. Her voice wavered at the end, but she did not cry. The opposing attorney then requested to bring his final point forward. He presented a stack of printed screenshots from social media, including comments calling Maya irresponsible, manipulative, and attention-seeking. He implied these public opinions could follow the child, creating an unstable environment. The judge frowned. She reminded him that anonymous online comments did not equate to facts. But Maya could see the damage those words might cause. It was not the comments themselves, but the perception that weighed heavily. The judge announced a brief recess. Maya sank into her seat as soon as the judge left the bench. Her hands trembled. Denise reassured her that this was only a preliminary hearing and not the final ruling. Maya nodded but felt a burn rising in her throat. She stepped out into the hallway to breathe. That was when Evan arrived. He walked through the courthouse doors, wearing a suit that made heads turn, but he seemed unaware of the impression he created. His focus was solely on Maya. When he reached her, he asked why she had not told him the hearing was today. She looked at him with tired eyes and said she did not want to pull him further into her legal troubles. She said she did not want the court to think she relied on him. He swallowed hard, fighting frustration. He told her she did not have to protect him. She responded quietly that she did not want to risk harming him or Harper. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. He said she was not alone, no matter what the court said. She looked up at him, then seeing sincerity in his eyes. But before she could respond, the opposing attorney walked past them with a pointed smirk. His gaze lingered on Evan in a calculating way. Maya stiffened again. She pulled her hands together tightly. Evan noticed and asked what happened during the hearing. She explained how the attorney twisted the viral clip and how they used strangers' comments to undermine her credibility. She admitted she felt like the court was stripping away her identity piece by piece. Evan's jaw tightened. He told her the court should be ashamed for letting a public misunderstanding influence something as sacred as a child's future. Maya said quietly that shame rarely stopped those with power. They were called back into the courtroom. When they entered, the judge reviewed the presented arguments with an expression that betrayed no emotion. Then she gave her temporary decision. She said she understood Maya's dedication, but due to recent public exposure and the need for continued evaluation, she was postponing the custody decision for several more months. Maya's breath faltered, but she stayed steady. The judge instructed her to maintain stability and reduce involvement in any public controversies. Then she adjourned the hearing. Maya stood still for several long seconds before slowly gathering her papers. The opposing attorney walked past her with a satisfied glance, knowing the extension worked in his favor. When Maya finally stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, the tension in her chest tightened further, as if the building itself had pressed down on her lungs. Evan followed her out. She did not speak at first. She simply stared at the sidewalk, gripping her folder, as if it were the only anchor she had left. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. She said she felt like no matter how hard she fought, the world kept telling her she was not enough. Evan stepped in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. He told her she was more than enough, and that the court simply did not know how to measure the value of a heart like hers. Maya shook her head and whispered that she could not afford to break, not when Connor needed her. Evan gently touched her arm, steadying her. He told her he would help her through this, even if the court never saw the truth. Maya looked at him, searching for something she was terrified to hope for. When she finally spoke, she said she did not know how to let someone stand beside her without losing the fight. She had been fighting alone for so long. Evan answered softly that she no longer had to choose between being strong and being supported. She could be both. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, she let herself lean into his presence, not as a burden, but as someone who deserved compassion. As the sun dipped behind the courthouse, Maya realized she was standing at the edge of a different kind of battle, one that tested not just her resilience, but her capacity to let herself be seen. And as Evan stood beside her, she felt a shift she could not yet name. Evan tried to go about his day after the courthouse, but the image of Maya's trembling hands and the defeated look in her eyes stayed with him like a bruise that would not fade. He had replayed every moment of that hearing, every shaky breath she took, every word she forced out with dignity, despite being pushed toward breaking. By evening, he could not focus on anything. Harper had fallen asleep early after a long day at school, leaving the house unusually quiet. That silence made his thoughts louder, pressing against him until he could no longer sit still. He grabbed his keys and drove to the elementary school where he knew Maya would still be grading papers. Night had settled around the building, and only a few classrooms glowed with fluorescent lights. He found her room without difficulty. Through the small window in the door, he saw her hunched over a pile of worksheets. Her shoulders slumped in a way that spoke of a weariness far deeper than simple exhaustion. He knocked softly. Maya looked up, startled. When she saw him, her expression flickered with surprise, before settling into a mixture of relief and guardedness. She opened the door slowly and asked why he was there so late. Evan told her he could not sit at home knowing she was hurting. She tried to smile, tried to reassure him she was fine, but her voice cracked on the second word. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The classroom felt strangely intimate, with only one lamp on at the back, and children's drawings taped across the walls, like reminders of the innocence she fought so hard to protect. Maya took a seat at a small table, folding her arms protectively, and he sat across from her. She exhaled shakily, as if holding herself together required physical effort. He asked how she was really doing. Not the polite version, not the brave version, the truth. Maya stared down at her hands as if searching for the right answer. She said she felt like she was losing pieces of herself in a battle that had no end. She said she felt judged by people who had never seen her hold Connor through nightmares or watched her teach him how to breathe through panic. She said she felt like the court did not want her to be enough. Evan listened, his jaw tightening with every word. He told her she had endured more in 1 year than most people did in a lifetime, and that the court was wrong to question her worth. Maya shook her head. She said she was tired of being strong, tired of pretending she was not hurting, tired of feeling like she had to apologize for existing in a world where she did not come from money or influence. Her voice wavered again, and this time she did not stop it. She whispered that every time she fought back, another blow came from a direction she did not expect. The viral clip, the families who judged her, the strangers who called her names, the attorney who twisted the truth, the judge who doubted her stability, and now a world that saw her as a spectacle rather than a woman holding on with everything she had. Evan felt something inside him crack. He leaned forward and told her that strength did not mean being untouched by pain. It meant surviving it long enough to rebuild. Maya looked up, then her eyes glassy under the soft lamplight. She asked him quietly why he cared so much, why he kept showing up, why he kept pulling her back from edges she did not know how to avoid. Evan inhaled sharply because the answer sat heavy in his chest. He said he cared because she mattered, because she made his home feel warmer, because Harper adored her, because her presence had started filling spaces in him he thought would stay empty forever. Maya's breath caught. For a moment her eyes softened and her shoulders loosened, but then fear flickered across her face. She whispered that she was terrified of becoming someone else he lost. She said she could not bear to be another wound in his life. His heart clenched. He told her she was not replacing anyone, and that what he felt did not diminish the love he had for Emma. It was different, new, something he never expected. But Maya shook her head again, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. She said the problem was not him, it was her. She said she felt like she was standing in the shadow of someone he loved so deeply that she would never measure up. She said she had her own grief too, her own failures, her own fears. And together they felt too heavy to carry. Evan felt the truth of her words hit him hard. He realized in that moment that he had been holding on to his own grief, without acknowledging how it shaped everything he did. He still avoided the room where Emma's things were stored. He still kept her photo next to his bed because he was afraid of what it meant to put it away. He still spoke about her in the present tense sometimes, as if letting go of that habit would mean losing her all over again. He closed his eyes and admitted it. He said he had never faced the depth of his pain because he did not know how. He said he had tried to move forward but could not bring himself to take the last step. Maya wiped her cheek and asked softly what the last step was. Evan looked at her and said it was allowing himself to love again. The room went still. The hum of the old classroom heater buzzed faintly in the background. Maya looked away for a moment, breathing unevenly. She told him she could not be with someone who had not made peace with his past, because she would always feel like she was borrowing space in his heart. She said she needed to know he was choosing her, not trying to fill a void. Her voice trembled as she said she cared for him deeply, maybe more than she should, but she could not bear to be half of something. She needed to be chosen fully. Evan felt the weight of that truth crush him. For the first time in 5 years, he felt completely overwhelmed by the truth he had avoided. He walked toward the window and braced himself against the sill, staring at the dark schoolyard outside. His voice came out raw, broken. He said he was afraid of letting go of Emma because he feared that doing so would erase her. Afraid of moving on because it felt like betrayal. Afraid of loving someone again because he did not know how to love without the fear of losing. Maya stood slowly and walked toward him, keeping a few steps between them. She told him that letting go was not forgetting. It was making room. It was allowing his heart to hold more than one truth, more than one love. He turned toward her, his eyes wet. She told him she needed him to face the grief he had buried, not for her, but for himself and for Harper. She said she wanted him, but she needed all of him, not a man still lost in the past. He nodded slowly, as if the understanding was breaking through him inch by inch. And then the truth fell out of him in a whisper. He said he was falling in love with her. Maya closed her eyes, absorbing the words like a painful blessing. She stepped closer, but not close enough to touch him. She said she was falling for him too, but she could not take another step until he took the step he had avoided for 5 years. Evan felt his own breath break. In that moment, he realized he was standing at a crossroads he could no longer avoid. For the first time since Emma's death, he felt the full weight of grief. Love, fear, and longing collide inside him. And for the first time, he understood that he had to face the past before he could claim the future. Evan drove home from the school in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. His thoughts tangled in a way he could no longer push aside. The night outside the car windows was quiet, but inside him, something was breaking open. He had tried for years to live around his grief, to tuck it neatly beneath responsibilities and routines. But Maya's words had cracked something he had held shut for too long. He parked in the driveway, turned off the engine, and rested his forehead against the steering wheel. For the first time in years, he let himself admit aloud that he was lost. Harper stirred when he entered the house, rubbing her eyes as she stepped into the hallway, wearing her dinosaur pajamas. She asked if he was okay. Evan knelt and pulled her into his arms, breathing in the scent of her lavender shampoo. He told her softly that he needed to take her somewhere tomorrow, someplace important. Harper asked if it was a surprise. He kissed the top of her head and told her yes. The next morning, he packed a small bag for the two of them and drove north toward the cemetery where Emma had been buried. Harper sat quietly in the back seat, sensing the solemn weight of their destination even before he spoke it. When they arrived, the morning fog drifted low across the grass. The air smelled of dew and pine. Evan took Harper's hand and walked slowly toward the headstone he had not visited in months. It had once been a place he came often, then a place he avoided because the weight of memory felt too sharp. Now he stood before it, feeling both numb and overwhelmingly human. Harper let go of his hand and touched the engraved letters that spelled her mother's name. She whispered a soft hello. Evan felt his throat tighten. He knelt beside Harper and placed a small bouquet of white lilies at the base of the stone. He sat back on his heels, the cold earth pressing through his jeans, and pulled Harper closer. For a long moment he did not speak. He simply breathed, letting the familiar ache settle without trying to push it away. When he finally found his voice, it came out rough and honest. He told Emma he was sorry for staying away for so long, sorry for pretending he was fine when he was not, sorry for letting fear keep him from moving forward. Harper whispered that she missed her mom, and Evan wrapped his arm around her, steadying the tremble in her voice. He told her it was okay to miss her, and okay to love someone else at the same time. Harper tilted her head and asked if loving Maya meant they would forget her mom. Evan felt a sharp pain at the question, but he knew the truth needed to be spoken clearly. He told her that love was not a cup that ran out. He said they could love Emma forever and still have room for new love, new warmth, new beginnings. He told her loving Maya would never erase her mother. Harper leaned into him, pressing her small frame against his chest. She whispered that she wanted to love Maya, but she had been scared. Scared that liking her meant she was losing something of her mom. Evan closed his eyes and kissed the top of her head, feeling tears gather. He told her he felt the same fear and had been holding on to things not because he needed them, but because he did not know how to put them down. After a long, quiet moment, Harper took his hand and said they should show Emma something. She led him back to the car and retrieved her backpack. From inside it, she pulled out a folded piece of paper. She walked back to the headstone, opened the paper, and revealed a drawing she had made the night before. It showed 3 figures holding hands, a father, a daughter, and a woman with gentle eyes. Harper placed the drawing gently against the stone and whispered that this was the future she hoped for. Evan felt his chest crack open in the most painful and beautiful way. He stood slowly breathing in the cold morning air and found himself speaking to Emma again. He told her he had loved her with everything he had. He said those years had shaped him, saved him, given him the child who kept his world from falling apart. He thanked her for the love they shared. Then he told her he was ready to let go of the guilt that kept him tethered. He told her he would never forget her, but he needed to make space for the life waiting in front of him. Harper slipped her hand into his, and together they stood in a silence that felt like acceptance. When they finally walked back to the car, Evan felt lighter not because the grief had vanished, but because it had found a place to rest instead of consuming him. Driving home, he caught glimpses of Harper, smiling softly at the drawing she had left behind. She seemed changed too, as if the quiet morning had helped her set down some of the weight she had been carrying. That evening, Evan entered the spare room he had avoided for years. It still held boxes of Emma's belongings untouched since the weeks after her passing. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside. The air felt thick with memories, but instead of retreating, he knelt and opened the first box. He folded her scarves, carefully placing them into a donation pile. He sorted through old letters, photographs, and trinkets, keeping some and letting others go. Each item felt like a small farewell. Hours later, he sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes, breathing deeply. The grief remained, but it no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a chapter he could honor without living inside of it. When he finally lay in bed, he looked at the nightstand where Emma's framed photo had always sat. He lifted it gently, traced her smile with his thumb, and whispered good night. Then he placed the frame inside a drawer, not to hide her, but to release both of them. For the first time in years, he felt the possibility of tomorrow. And in that space between letting go and beginning again, one truth echoed clearly through him. He was ready to choose a new love. And there was only one woman he wanted to choose. Maya woke before dawn, her body tense from a restless night. She had tried to sleep, but anxiety kept looping through her mind like an endless warning. After the court hearing, she had hoped things would calm down, that the world would lose interest in her name and move on to the next viral headline. Instead, the opposite happened. Her phone buzzed non-stop throughout the night, with messages she was too afraid to open. She finally forced herself to check one notification at the top of the screen. It was a tag from a parenting forum, then a link from a local news page, then a flood of messages from her colleagues at school. Her hands trembled as she opened the first link. Her breath left her body in a painful rush. The headline read, "Elementary Teacher Under Investigation," after video shows alleged child abuse, and below it was a blurry edited clip of her holding Connor in the classroom months ago. But it had been cut, sliced, and stitched together to look like something entirely different. In the real moment, she had been calming him during a panic episode, holding his arms gently so he would not hurt himself. But the doctored version made it look like she grabbed him aggressively. Maya covered her mouth with her hand, her heart hammering. Panic spread through her chest like a fire. She scrolled down and found comments filled with outrage from strangers who did not know anything about her. People saying she should be fired, people saying children should be taken from her, people calling her unfit, people who believed the worst version of a lie. Her vision blurred. She dropped the phone. Connor appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily, unaware that the ground beneath their lives had just cracked open. Maya wiped her face quickly and forced a small smile, telling him to get dressed for school. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook when she packed his lunchbox. Half an hour later, as she walked him to the car, her neighbor approached with a stiff expression and said someone from Child Protective Services had been asking questions. Maya felt the world tilt. She managed a polite nod, buckled Connor in, and drove him to school, every inch of her body trembling. As soon as she dropped him off, she parked in an empty lot and sank forward, pressing her forehead to the steering wheel. She tried to breathe, but every breath felt too shallow. She knew who had done this, her sisters-in-laws. They had access to old footage from a nanny cam in the classroom during a volunteer day months ago. They must have manipulated it, cutting out the parts that showed him spiraling, the parts that explained why she was holding him. They had weaponized her care against her. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Denise, her attorney. The message was brief. "We need to talk immediately." Maya forced herself to drive to the lawyer's office. Denise greeted her with a look that blended fury and sorrow. Without saying a word, she handed Maya a printed email from the opposing attorney. It requested an emergency hearing to reevaluate Connor's custody due to new evidence of abuse. Maya felt like she was sinking underwater. She whispered that it was fake, that it was twisted. Denise said she believed her, but the court would take the allegations seriously until they could prove otherwise. An emergency hearing meant they could temporarily remove Connor from her care. Maya's breath fractured. She asked how long the court could take him. Denise hesitated before answering. It could be days, weeks, months. Maya pressed her hand against her stomach and whispered no. She could not lose Connor. He was not just her nephew, he was her boy, her family. the only piece of her sister she had left. The thought of him being placed in another home ripped through her like a blade. Denise told her they needed to gather every piece of evidence, every witness, every professional record, showing Connor had never been harmed in her care. Maya nodded numbly. She stood, thanked Denise in a voice that barely sounded like her own, and walked outside. The sky looked too bright for a day that had shattered her life. She made it to the car before her knees finally buckled. She sat in the driver's seat and cried in a way she had not cried in years, crying that shook her ribs, crying that tasted like helplessness and fear and grief all at once. She did not know how long she stayed like that. An hour, maybe 2. Her phone rang again. It was Evan. She stared at the screen, unable to breathe. She could not pull him into this storm. She could not let him ruin his reputation by standing next to someone now being painted as a danger to a child. She let the call go to voicemail, then another call, then another, finally a text. "Maya, please, I know something's wrong. Talk to me." She squeezed her eyes shut and typed back with unsteady fingers. "You need to stay away from me. For your sake and Harper's, please do not come." Evan responded immediately. "I'm already on my way." Her heart lurched in panic. She typed back sharply, begging him not to come, telling him it was too dangerous for him, too damaging, that she would not let him get dragged down with her. She added one final message, the hardest thing she had ever typed. "It's better if Harper does not see me anymore." Evan called again, but she silenced the phone and threw it onto the seat. She started the engine and drove home before he could find her. By the time she walked into the house, her legs were unsteady. She picked up Connor from school and tried to smile as he told her about his day. When he hugged her, she held him too tightly, terrified it might be one of the last times. That night, after he fell asleep, she sat on the living room floor with the lights off. The silence pressed against her like a weight. She had fought so hard, endured so much, and believed she was finally gaining ground. And now everything she had built was collapsing because of one manipulated lie. When she heard a knock at the door, her breath caught. She stayed completely still, hoping whoever it was would leave. But the knocking came again, soft but steady. When she finally opened the door, Evan stood on her porch rain, clinging to his hair, his chest rising and falling with urgency. She told him he should not be there. He stepped inside anyway. His eyes scanned her face, taking in her swollen eyes and trembling hands. He asked her what happened. She shook her head, tears spilling again. She told him that her life was falling apart, that everything had been taken from her, that she could lose Connor. Evan stepped closer, but she backed away. She said she could not let him stay, could not let him sacrifice his reputation, could not let Harper be connected to someone being dragged through the mud. She said she loved Harper too much to cause her harm. Her voice broke when she said she loved him too much too. Evan froze. The words echoed through the room with a tremor she could not hide. Maya covered her mouth, horrified that she had said it out loud. She whispered for him to go before she destroyed anything else. Evan stood very still, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with something fierce and unbearable. He told her he was not leaving, not now, not ever. But Maya shook her head, tears spilling faster. She whispered one last plea. "Please, for Harper, for you, stay away from me." Then she closed the door gently, leaving Evan standing on the porch, soaked under the rain, staring at the barrier she had just built between them. Inside the house, Maya collapsed to the floor, holding herself, as if trying to keep the pieces together. Outside, Evan remained unmoving, the rain falling harder, washing down his face, as if echoing everything breaking inside him. The night after Maya shut the door on him, Evan barely slept. He lay awake in the dark, replaying every word she had spoken, every tear that had rolled down her cheeks, every tremor in her voice when she told him to stay away. He knew why she had said it. He understood her fear. But her pain had carved a mark in him he could not ignore. The next morning, Harper noticed immediately that something was wrong. She found him sitting at the kitchen table, long after his coffee had gone cold, staring at his phone, like it held a door he did not know how to open. She climbed into the chair beside him, her small feet swinging above the floor, and asked where Maya was. Evan exhaled slowly, choosing his words with care. He said Maya had something very scary happening, something unfair, and she needed space. Harper frowned, clearly unsatisfied. She asked if Maya was sick. Evan shook his head. She asked if Maya had stopped liking them. Evan's throat tightened. He told her no, that was not it. Harper pressed her lips together, thinking hard. Then she slid off the chair, grabbed her jacket, and told him she needed to go somewhere. When he asked where, she said to Maya. Evan stiffened. He told her they could not just show up. But Harper crossed her arms, stubborn, in the way only a child with a too big heart can be. She said Maya always comes when I am sad. Now she is sad, so I have to go. Evan hesitated for a moment that felt too long. He had promised Maya he would give her space, but he also remembered the way she had looked at him last night, terrified, crushed, trying to protect everyone but herself. Maybe Harper was seeing something he could not. Maybe the one person Maya might let through the storm was the girl who had healed both of them without even trying. Evan finally nodded. He grabbed his keys and drove them to Maya's neighborhood. Harper practically jumped out of the car before it fully stopped. She ran up the porch steps and knocked with both fists. Evan followed more slowly, anxiety coiled tight inside him. When Maya opened the door, she looked as if she had not slept. Her eyes were puffy, her hair messy, her shoulders slumped. She froze when she saw Harper standing on the porch. Harper did not wait for permission. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Maya's waist. Maya inhaled sharply, startled, then sank slowly to her knees, hugging Harper back, with a desperation she could not hide. The moment their bodies touched something inside, Maya cracked. Harper pulled back and cupped Maya's cheeks with her small hands. Her voice was soft but certain when she said, "You are not bad. You are not scary. You are good and you help people." Maya's mouth trembled. She tried to speak, but her voice collapsed. Harper leaned closer and whispered the words that broke whatever walls Maya had left. "You're the only one who talks to my heart." Maya's eyes filled instantly. She pulled Harper into her arms again, holding her tightly, as if the child's small body was the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. Evan watched quietly from the porch, the sight so tender it hurt. When Maya finally stood still, holding Harper's hand, she glanced at Evan with an expression full of apology and longing and fear. She asked softly why he had brought Harper. He told her he had not. He said Harper had brought herself. Harper nodded proudly, squeezing Maya's hand. Maya let out a shaky laugh, the first hint of light in her face all day. She invited them inside. The living room was dim blinds, still-drawn blankets strewn across the couch, from where she had clearly spent the night trying to sleep. Maya sat down slowly, exhausted beyond measure. Harper climbed beside her, curling into her side, like a child instinctively seeking the safest place in the room. For a long time, none of them spoke. The silence was not awkward. It was heavy but gentle. Eventually, Maya whispered what happened. She told them about the fake video, the accusations, the emergency hearing, the threat of losing Connor. When she said the words "losing him," her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, as if trying to hold back a scream. Harper leaned against her harder, as if she could shield her from the pain. Evan sat across from them, feeling his own anger rise like a tide. He asked her who had done it. Maya hesitated, then admitted she believed it was her sisters-in-laws. Evan nodded grimly. He told her they would not get away with it. Maya shook her head weakly. She said she did not want to drag him into more trouble. She did not want him to risk things for her. Evan leaned forward. He told her he was not there to save her. He said he was there to stand beside her. He said the court could not accuse her of depending on him if he was only there as another witness to the truth. Maya looked down, swallowing hard. She whispered that she did not know how to accept help without feeling like she was failing. Evan answered quietly that accepting help was not failing. It was surviving. Harper looked between them, then took both of their hands and placed them together in her lap. She said, "Dad, Maya belongs with us." Maya closed her eyes as tears streamed down her face. She whispered that she loved Harper, that she loved how brave she was, how kind she was, and how honest she was. Then, before she could stop herself, she whispered the words that changed everything. "I love you too." The words were meant for Harper, but Evan felt them hit him like a chord struck too deeply to ignore. Harper looked at her father with wide, knowing eyes, then back at Maya. Evan took a slow breath and told Maya they would fight this. He said they would gather evidence, find the original footage, bring in professionals who knew Connor's history, get statements from the school, from neighbors, from anyone who had seen the truth. Maya whispered that she was scared. Evan admitted he was too, but he added that fear was not the enemy. Isolation was. Maya stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand with trembling fingers. She said she did not know how the court would judge her, but she knew one thing. She did not want to face any of this alone. Evan exhaled slowly, relief flooding him. He squeezed her hand gently. Harper smiled as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Maya inhaled shakily, wiping her tears. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt anchored, held, believed. Harper climbed into her lap again, resting her head against Maya's chest. Maya wrapped her arms around her, closing her eyes as she breathed in the child's familiar warmth. She whispered thank you, her voice cracking. Evan stood, moved to sit beside her, and placed a steady hand on her back. Maya did not flinch. She leaned into him slightly, a small but powerful gesture of trust. Outside, the sun began breaking through the morning clouds, lighting up the room with soft golden light. And sitting there with Harper in her arms and Evan by her side, Maya felt something she had not felt in days. Hope. Real, unshakable hope. The kind that grows when the right people refuse to let you drown. The kind that only appears when love chooses you, even in your darkest hour. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, giving Maya only the weekend to gather what felt like an entire lifetime's worth of proof that she was not the monster the doctored video portrayed. Evan spent every hour beside her coordinating calls, printing documents, contacting professionals who could testify to Connor's behavioral history. Harper stayed close too, drawing pictures for Connor, writing small notes that said things like, "You are safe, and Auntie Maya loves you." Every time Maya looked at those drawings, her throat tightened. By Sunday evening, they had gathered statements from Connor's therapist letters, from teachers' written testimonies from parents of students, and even footage from the school security cameras that showed Maya comforting Connor during previous panic episodes in the same gentle way she always had. But whether the judge would have time to review everything was still uncertain. The opposing attorney had submitted the fake video first, meaning Maya would be walking into court already under suspicion. Maya barely slept that night. She sat on the couch holding a mug of cold tea, her fingers curled tightly around it. Evan sat beside her, watching her with a quiet vigilance, as if he believed the weight she carried could split her in half at any moment. He told her again that she was not alone. She nodded, but fear still pulsed beneath her skin. Morning came too quickly. At the courthouse, Maya walked through the doors with her shoulders straight, wearing a simple navy dress that made her look steady and grounded. Evan walked beside her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence like a shield. Harper was with them too, holding Maya's hand tightly. Denise met them at the entrance, carrying a thick folder filled with their evidence. She gave Maya a reassuring look, though the tension in her jaw betrayed her concern. The opposing attorney stood near the courtroom door, speaking confidently with Maya's sisters-in-laws. Their faces held triumphant certainty, as if they had already won. Maya felt her stomach twist, but Harper squeezed her hand and whispered, "You have us." When the judge entered the courtroom, everyone rose. The judge looked more stern than before, her expression tight, as she glanced at the agenda before her. The opposing attorney presented first, playing the doctored video on a large monitor. Every manipulated second felt like a knife. Maya looked away, unable to watch herself, portrayed as something she had never been. The attorney narrated the video with cold precision, using words like violent restraint and escalating behavior that painted Maya as unstable. He argued that Connor should be placed in temporary foster care until a full investigation could be completed. Maya's breath hitched. Her hands trembled under the table. She forced herself not to crumble. When it was Denise's turn, she stood and began by challenging the credibility of the video. She explained it had been edited, then presented the original footage, time-stamped and verified. When the screen switched to the real clip, the courtroom fell silent. The video showed Connor mid-panic attack, thrashing and crying. It showed Maya speaking to him softly, grounding him, holding his arms gently so he would not hurt himself. It showed the truth. Maya felt tears fill her eyes, not from sadness but from relief. The judge watched intently, her expression shifting from skepticism to concentration. Denise then presented statements from professionals confirming Connor's trauma history and Maya's consistent nurturing care. She handed the judge written testimonies from co-workers, neighbors, and parents of students who described Maya as patient, compassionate, and deeply protective of children. When Denise finished, the judge looked at Maya. She asked if Maya wanted to speak. Maya rose slowly, her hands shaking. She told the judge she loved Connor as her own child. She said she had held his nightmares, his fears, his hopes in her arms since the day her sister died. She said she had made mistakes, but hurting him had never been one of them. She said she would break apart before she ever let him feel unsafe. Her voice cracked near the end, but she did not cry. She simply stood there, honest and vulnerable. Then the judge asked if there were any additional witnesses. Denise nodded. She called Evan. The courtroom shifted with a ripple of murmurs. Evan rose, buttoned his suit jacket, and approached the stand with a calm strength that filled the room. The opposing attorney immediately objected, claiming Evan's presence was irrelevant. The judge overruled him. She wanted to hear what he had to say. Evan stated his name and occupation, then spoke with steady conviction. He said he had seen Maya with children many times, including his own daughter. He said he had witnessed her patience, her gentleness, her ability to understand what others overlooked. He said she had shown more empathy in one day than many adults showed in their entire lives. Then he paused, looked directly at the judge, and added that the accusations were not only false, but cruel. That what had been taken from Maya was not just her reputation, but the truth of her character. That no child could ever be safer than in her care. Maya swallowed hard. She had not expected him to speak so boldly. The opposing attorney looked rattled. Denise then called one final witness, Harper. The courtroom gasped softly. Evan turned toward his daughter, ready to intervene. But Harper was already walking forward, her head high, her small shoes clicking on the polished floor. The judge leaned down kindly and asked her if she knew why she was there. Harper nodded. She said she wanted to tell the truth. Denise asked if she knew Maya. Harper nodded again. She said Maya was the person who made her feel brave. That Maya never yelled, never hurt anyone, never made her scared. She said Maya helped her speak in front of her class, helped her sleep on nights she missed her mom, and helped her dad smile again. Then Harper looked at the judge with sincerity only a child could carry. She said, "She saved my dad first, then she saved me. You should let her save Connor too." Every breath in the courtroom vanished. Maya pressed her hand to her mouth, a tear slipping down her cheek. Even the judge sat still for a long moment, absorbing the weight of the child's words. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was softer. She dismissed Harper gently, thanking her for her honesty. Then she reviewed the evidence again, tapping her pen thoughtfully. The room held its breath. Finally, she delivered her ruling. The video was proven manipulated. The accusations lacked credibility. Maya's consistent history of care was undeniable. Custody would remain with Maya. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, but Maya heard none of them. She felt her legs weaken. Evan caught her before she could fall, steadying her with hands that trembled with relief. Maya buried her face against his shoulder, sobbing quietly. Harper wrapped her arms around both of them. The judge added that an investigation would be opened into the falsified footage and any deliberate attempt to mislead the court. The opposing attorney stiffened. Maya's sisters-in-laws looked stunned, color draining from their faces. But Maya barely registered them. All she felt was the overwhelming, bone-deep relief of knowing Connor was safe, that the truth had been seen, that she had not lost the child she loved beyond measure. When they stepped out of the courthouse, the sun hit her face. The world felt lighter, wider, possible. Evan took her hand. Harper hugged her tightly, and for the first time in weeks, Maya could breathe without fear. The courthouse steps were still warm from the afternoon sun when Maya finally let herself breathe, truly breathe. The kind of breath that fills every corner of the lungs, every quiet shadow inside the chest, the kind she had forgotten her body was capable of. Evan stood beside her, fingers interlaced with hers, while Harper hugged her waist tightly, as if afraid Maya might disappear if she let go. For the first time since the nightmare began, Maya felt the weight she had been carrying for months lift just slightly, like a storm cloud drifting off after refusing to leave the sky. They drove back to her house, with the windows cracked open, the wind tangling through Harper's hair as she hummed a small tune in the back seat. Evan kept glancing at Maya as he drove, his expression soft, almost reverent. Maya did not speak. She could not. The relief was too big, too fragile. When they arrived, Harper ran ahead to the porch to collect the drawings she had taped there earlier for luck. Maya stood by the passenger door for a moment, her hand still resting on the handle, her heart aching with gratitude and exhaustion. Evan walked around the car to stand in front of her. He touched her cheek, gently brushing away a tear she had not realized was falling. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice unsteady. Evan shook his head. He said she had done this, her courage, her truth, her determination. He had only stood beside her. Harper burst through the door again, waving one of her crayon drawings like a victory flag. Maya laughed softly, the sound thin but real. It felt like a miracle. They spent the rest of the afternoon inside eating takeout on the couch, while Harper chattered about how brave she had been in court. Maya listened to every word, smiling at the child's excitement. She loved how safe Harper felt around her. how deeply the little girl believed in her. As the evening light shifted into gold, Evan suggested they take a drive, somewhere quiet, somewhere beautiful. Maya hesitated at first, but something inside her whispered, "Say yes." So she did. They dropped Harper off with one of Evan's closest friends, someone Harper adored, and then Evan drove toward Sonoma Valley. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of orange, lavender, and rose. The rolling hills glowed under the soft light, and the vineyards stretched endlessly on both sides of the road, serene and untouched. Maya watched the horizon, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and fear. Relief that she had won, fear of what came next. They parked near an overlook where the valley opened wide beneath them. The air was cool, scented faintly, with the grapevines and warm soil. Maya wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because the moment felt too big to face with bare hands. Evan stepped beside her close, but not touching. He wanted her to have space, but he wanted to be near her too. For a while they simply watched the sky change. The silence between them was the soft kind, the kind that holds two people gently instead of dividing them. Eventually Maya spoke. She said she still could not believe everything was over. Evan turned to her and said it was not over. Not really, but the danger had passed. The worst had passed. She looked at him, then her eyes reflective in the fading light. She asked him why he had stood by her when he had every reason not to. Evan stepped closer. He said because he saw her, because she never once chose the easy path, because she protected Connor with the fierceness of someone who knows what love costs, because she made Harper feel seen, because she had already changed him in ways he could not begin to explain. Maya swallowed hard. Her heart swelled and ached at the same time. She said quietly that she had tried to push him away, because she did not want to ruin his life. Evan smiled a sad, tender thing. He said she could never ruin anything. Her presence had done the opposite. She had rebuilt parts of him he did not know were broken. Maya felt tears gather again. She turned toward the valley, the wind brushing her hair across her face. She whispered the question she had once asked him on a day filled with humiliation and unlikely beginnings. "Do you belong to someone?" Evan moved behind her, gently brushing her hair away from her cheek. His voice was low when he answered, "I belong to the life I choose, and you are the first thing that feels like a choice made with my whole heart." Maya turned to face him fully. He was standing there, chest rising with slow, deliberate breaths, eyes steady on hers. She felt something shift inside him, something quiet and profound. Evan reached into his pocket. For a moment her breath hitched, but he did not pull out a ring. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out a folded slip of paper, the drawing Harper had left on Emma's grave. He held it between them, a father, a daughter, a woman with gentle eyes. He said Harper wanted her in their life long before he admitted it to himself. He said he wanted to take the next step, but not out of obligation or because of her custody battle. He wanted to take it because of love, because he had spent 5 years surviving, and now he wanted to live. He knelt, slowly, purposefully. Maya pressed a trembling hand over her mouth as her vision blurred. The sun dipped fully below the hills, leaving the sky glowing around them. Evan looked up at her and said the words that turned her world inside out. "You once asked me something impossible. You asked it on a night when you thought you had nothing to offer, but you gave me something that night. You gave me a beginning." Maya choked on a breath. Her hand shook against her lips. Evan smiled softly. "Can you be my wife?" The valley held its breath. The sky seemed to pause. Maya sank to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face, her hands cupping his cheeks as she whispered back the same question she had once asked him in desperation. "Can you be my husband?" Evan closed his eyes, his forehead touching hers. Yes, forever yes. They kissed, a tender, trembling, healing kiss. The kind that seals a promise, not just between two hearts, but between two lives. And in that moment on the hill above Sonoma Valley, Maya realized something she had never believed could happen. She was not losing anything. She was gaining a family, a future, a love she had not dared to dream of. The wedding was small, by choice, intimate in a way that made every detail feel like a heartbeat. They chose a hillside property in Sonoma Valley, not far from the Overlook, where Evan had asked Maya to marry him. The vineyard owner, a friend of Evan's, insisted they use the venue for free after hearing their story. Maya cried when she learned that, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that kindness was finally finding its way back to her. The sun rose gently the morning of the ceremony, casting a soft golden glow through the windows of the small cottage where Maya got ready. She wore a simple ivory dress that flowed like quiet water when she walked, her hair pinned loosely with sprigs of baby's breath. Harper had insisted on weaving herself. Harper buzzed around the room, adjusting imagined imperfections and asking every 5 minutes if Maya needed more sparkles. Maya laughed each time, telling her she was perfect already. In the next room, Evan stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the collar of his suit. His hands were steady, but his breath wasn't. He had waited 5 years to feel the way he did now, hopeful, alive, terrified, in the best possible way. His best friend Daniel clapped a hand on his shoulder and told him he'd never looked less like a billionaire and more like a man absolutely in love. Evan only smiled. He didn't want to look powerful today. He wanted to look worthy. The ceremony took place under an arch wrapped in vines and white roses. A dozen guests filled the wooden chairs, close friends. A few co-workers Maya adored. The therapist who had helped Connor. The teacher who had championed Harper through her grief. People who had been part of the journey that had shaped them. Connor walked down the aisle as ring bearer, wearing a tiny bow tie he tugged at nervously. Harper followed him, tossing petals so enthusiastically that half of them blew backward. Maya stepped out last, and when Evan saw her, everything inside him stilled. She walked toward him slowly, sunlight turning her into something almost too tender to touch. He felt his eyes burn, and when she reached him, she whispered, "Don't cry yet. I can't promise I'll stop if you start." The officiant began, but Maya barely heard the words. She saw only Evan standing, tall shoulders, relaxed eyes, soft in the way only she ever saw. When it was time to exchange vows, Evan held her trembling hands and spoke first. He said he had known grief as a companion for so long that he thought it was the only language his heart remembered. Then she came into his life, not to replace anything, not to erase anything, but to remind him that love did not run out just because loss had taken something precious. He said she had given him back the courage to feel again, to hope again, to build something new without fear that it dishonored the past. He said loving her had not diminished the life he had before, but had expanded the life he believed he could have now. Maya wiped her cheeks as he spoke. Then it was her turn. She said she once believed love belonged to people with perfect lives, stable families, clean histories. She thought her scars disqualified her. She thought her failures defined her. But Evan had shown her that love could be built from truth, from brokenness, from two people choosing each other again and again, even when the world tried to tear them apart. She said she didn't bring wealth or influence into this marriage. She brought only her heart, but she promised that heart would belong to him and to Harper and to Connor for the rest of her life. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Evan kissed her gently, then deeply, while the valley drew in a warm breath around them. Harper threw petals in the air and shouted, "She's ours now." And the laughter that followed sounded like the beginning of something bright. The reception took place under strings of lights that swayed in the breeze. Harper and Connor danced in circles until they were dizzy, falling onto the grass in giggling heaps. Evan pulled Maya close as music drifted softly around them. They swayed slowly, forehead to forehead, letting the moment wrap around their bodies like a promise. Later, Evan found Maya standing alone on the hill overlooking the valley. Her veil fluttered behind her like a sigh of relief. When he wrapped his arms around her from behind, she leaned into him without hesitation. He asked her what she was thinking. She said she had spent so long fighting to keep her family together that she never imagined she would get another one. He rested his chin on her shoulder and whispered that she hadn't just gotten one. She had built one. He wasn't the architect. She was. As the sky darkened, lanterns were lit one by one. Guests drifted away until only the four of them remained. Harper sat in Maya's lap, resting her head on her chest, half asleep. Connor leaned against Evan's leg, yawning. Evan kissed Maya's temple and whispered that this moment, this family, this peace, was everything he never knew he could hope for. Maya closed her eyes and breathed in the night air, feeling complete in a way she had never felt before. A way that felt solid, real, earned. When they finally gathered the children and headed home, Maya paused at the door of their new shared house. The porch light glowed warmly, illuminating the home that held every version of their future. She looked at Evan, at Harper wrapped in his arms, at Connor holding her hand, and she understood something she had never believed until now. Family wasn't about blood, it wasn't about legality, it wasn't about perfection. Family was about showing up, about choosing each other even when the world tried to pull them apart. Family was about love that grew in the cracks and made something stronger than before. She stepped inside her new home, her new life, her new family, and whispered under her breath, "We choose each other." Evan heard her. He smiled, and together they closed the door on the past and walked forward into everything they had fought so hard to build. If you are still here with me, listening to the final moments of this story, I want you to take a breath and let the weight of what you just witnessed settle softly on your heart. Because this was not just a romance, it was a reminder of something we all forget when life gets loud. We forget that healing is not a straight line. We forget that love sometimes walks into our lives, disguised as chaos, as loss, as second chances we never expected to be brave enough to take. And we forget that families are not always made the traditional way. Sometimes they form quietly, piece by piece, through the people who stay when everything falls apart. Tonight you followed a single billionaire who thought he was still married to his grief, and a woman who thought the world would never choose someone like her. You watched a little girl find her voice again. You watched a child who had lost everything find safety in the arms of someone who fought the world to protect him. And you watched love return to a man who believed his heart had already lived its entire lifetime. If any moment in this story touched you, or made you pause, or made you feel something familiar in your own chest, I hope you carry that feeling for a while. I hope it reminds you that you deserve a love that meets you where you break and stays long enough to help you rebuild. And now it is your turn. Tell me, if you were in Maya's place, on that night with the world turning against you and everything you loved at risk, would you have dared to ask a stranger to be your husband? Would you have had the courage to choose hope instead of fear? And if you were in Evan's place, standing in the ruins of your past, would you have opened your heart again to someone who saw you with a clarity you didn't know you needed? Comment below and tell me where in the world you are listening from tonight. Tell me your city, your country, or even just your couch. Because every time you share your voice, you help us build a community of people who believe in love the way we do here. Before you go, make sure to subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Stories that make your heart ache, heal hope, and rise again. Like this video if you believe love deserves a second chance. And share it with someone who might need the reminder that no matter how dark the night gets, there is always a sunrise waiting on the other side. Thank you for spending this time with us. This is Emma wishing you peace, wishing you courage, and wishing you the kind of love that chooses you right back.